Welcome to The View, where recruitment, marketing and society comes together.
Get ready for Chance Bleu-Montogomery to blow you away. His incredible and emotional tale of violence, prison, and mental incarceration will really inspire you. He's now an advocate and expert in how organisations can really drive social mobility. And honestly, I believe you will take a huge amount away from this conversation. My name's Neil Armstrong from TribePad. This is The View, where people, recruitment and purpose come together. Hi, I am chatting with Chance Bleu-Montogomery, who's the Partner Support Manager and ED&I Evangelist for Bridge of Hope Careers. So Chance is going to share with you an incredible inspirational story that he shared with at our TribePad Customer Forum last year. But most importantly, he's got a huge amount of perspective on how organisations can enable social mobility, what the benefits are, and some really great advice for how organisations can benefit from a more diverse pool of candidates, which can drive all sorts of positive outcomes. So hi, Chance, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having us.
No problem, no problem. So look, before we go into things, ED&I, it has been a really high priority for many organizations, increasingly over the last few years. And then particularly since COVID, we've also seen an increased focus on well-being and mental health within HR teams and talent acquisition teams. What changes have you seen in the market in the last few years that you think are for the better?
I think there's a lot of people trying to understand different spaces, different talent pools, which is absolutely fantastic, because neurotypical people, for instance, have had the lay of the land, if you like, and people haven't been able to truly understand people with different neurodivergence, and they really is an appetite for that now, which is great, and the more people show an interest in it, the more other people, candidates with neurodivergence will come out then and say, yes, I'm dyslexic, or I'm, autistic, or what have you. As it stood before, it was a bit of a stigma, and therefore people wouldn't give this data across to even get the support. Instead, they spend their lives masking their neurodivergence, for instance, in the workplace. So there's lots of changes there happening, which I'm really pleased about.
And so, Bridge of Hope Careers and your role as an ED&I evangelist, what part do you play? How can Bridge of Hope help organisations, and what do you do there?
Well, one thing that we certainly can do, we can supply diverse candidates from across the board, whether it's people with neurodivergence, like I mentioned, Black and minority, LGBT, the veterans, the women returners, anyone who's facing barriers. We have about 64, I think today, or 67 live candidates looking for jobs as we speak right now, which is brilliant, because we've shot up from about 20,000 recently, and it's really growing quite quick. And not only that, we're able to find them in different ways. So for instance, we have these candidates fed in through 105 charities. We have non-Russell Group universities, about 25 of those. The candidates are coming in through there. And we have people who identify as system impacted, marginalized or disadvantaged, and they'll knock on the door and of course come in. We're inclusive, and we have systems in place. If they need support as well, they can get that. But the way that really pleases me is finding candidates who have given up, hidden candidates. They've given up on your conventional jobs boards. Like if you're autistic, it's I think the last I read was about nearly 30% of people now, which is a massive improvement, are getting jobs who are autistic, for instance. But there's still 70% of them that would have knocked on the doors of Reed, LinkedIn Monster, all these sort of things, as people like myself would, and not getting applicant tracking systems, are not letting them in. The hiring processes are alienating people with autism, for instance. And so we've been finding, where did they go? If we've given up, where have we gone? And we're able to find them. We've found people, we found groups in chat rooms, on forums. We've found them on Spotify, listening to podcasts about how crap it is trying to get a job with autism. And then we're able to use programmatic media and put that's right in front of their faces, saying something to the tune of, we know you've given up, but for once your neurodivergence will gain your favor. Here's an employer looking for you. And we've had some incredible results. We've found diverse talent in places where people didn't believe diversity was or lived, and using this technology. So for me, it just means going out and finding those people as well who's given up and turning their lives around and offering hope to them.
Fantastic. So, I mean, it sounds like you've got a really rich pool of interesting candidates and using some pretty innovative ways to reach those different marginalized audiences. We'll definitely come back to that and touch on that. And also, you know, the point about how organizations can make sure they're not putting off these candidates by their advert, their EVP, their process, their technology, what have you. We'd definitely like to touch on that. Before we get into that, obviously, the reason we're having this conversation is you came to our customer forum last year. You shared your own personal story and history about how you've got to where you are, which was, you know, it was pretty touching. It touched the hearts of everybody in the room. It brought some tears to the eyes. So why don't you give us a quick background of how you've got to where you've got to and why it's so relevant for this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this is why I'm so passionate about the work that we do. And it is due to my own experiences in life. My childhood experiences were really tough. I was born, unfortunately, into a family where my dad didn't think I was his. And so I experienced huge amounts of physical abuse as a child, the first being before I was 1 year old. And that left me with what I thought were birthmarks until I was 21. And mum told me what really happened on my 21st birthday because she thought I was a man at that age and could handle it. But it wasn't true. I couldn't handle it. In fact, my life, I ran away from home a lot. You know, I didn't feel significant at home. And so, I went out and I finally stayed and I met some friends and they made me feel good. They made me feel significant and loved, in fact. But the byproduct of that was they were from the antisocial membership. And it was only going to be a matter of time before I got into trouble. And I did. By the time I was 16, I ended up in prison. And by the time I was 18, my sister, who was my absolute rock, she took me to a mental hospital by the time I was 18 because the childhood traumas and depression had seriously kicked in at this point. You know, and I tried to make some changes in my life, not too much success, you know, and like I said, my sister, who was my absolute rock, my only rock, and it was her birthday yesterday, you know, so it was in memory, and she died. She died young, age 36, of cancer. And I didn't want to talk about it because that would make it real, which is the worst possible thing you could do, because within a year, my life completely fell apart, completely unraveled. And I ended up back inside one last time. But this time I asked myself this question. I said, do you like who you are? And the answer was a solid no. In fact, I thought if this was going to be my existence for my future, I didn't see the point in having a life. And I'll never forget, I just didn't see the point in living on. And so I was left with these choices to literally either jump off a cliff or change.
Yeah.
And so I threw everything and the kitchen sink and the neighbor's kitchen sink at change and spent 3 years and 10 months almost every day in therapy to unlock some pain and to deal with those childhood traumas, while spending 5 years studying with the Open University to give myself an education my childhood didn't afford unto me, and on slaves of personal development programs. And then this incredible, beautiful day came upon me, where after all that personal development, I was just filled with ebullience, and the warm tears of joy came flooding uncontrollably down my face. And it was because for the first time in my entire life, I felt freedom. No more emotional discombobulation, no more anger. I was filled with forgiveness and topped to the brim with self-respect. And I realized two things that happened to me on that day. One, my childhood experiences were no longer going to define my future. And two, I'd finally become the person I was always meant to be. And that was the day I decided whatever work I'm doing, I want it to be changing lives. I want it to be making a difference, nourishing communities. And I went on to do that. You know, I've enjoyed the support from charities myself. So I know what it's like to have that support, and really done quite a lot of giving back and transforming the lives of young men who'd come into contact with the criminal justice system, because I have the blueprint for that change. But then now with Bridge of Hope, I can support everyone: veterans, people with neurodivergence like myself, people with different abilities. I prefer the term than disabilities, you know, And I thought, this is where I want to live, and this was perfect for me. It really was like an invitation to heaven to come to a place where candidates who were system impacted like me could walk towards employers who were looking for them.
It's an incredible, inspiring story of, you know, resilience and grit and transformation. And, you know, it is great you've had that support from those charities who were there to, you know, help you when you needed it most, I guess. And
Yeah.
you know, incredible foundation to then build this bridge of hope from.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, thank you for sharing that story. It's really, really incredible. And you know, in the time that you've been, you know, focusing on changing lives, you know, to support more people like you and people from all these different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think as a society and as an industry, are we making progress on, you know, reducing those barriers?
And do you know that we are making some progress, because we partner with about 66, 67 blue chip employers, you know, from KPMG, Molson Coors, Diageo, you know, the lot. And some of them are coming looking for some really, they're doing some really great work, you know. So some of them are looking for the advisory that we offer, so that they can check that their candidate pathways are clear. And the barriers are reduced, which is absolutely fantastic. And many people are looking to subscribe onto our masterclasses as well, which shows there's an appetite for learning in this space, which is grown. Of course, there's still a bit of greenwashing. There's still a bit of we'll do it when we need to do it, or we'll do this when we need to win a tender, you know, or to write a tender and stuff like that. But I'm noticing a shift in mindsets. The more and more we go out and tell these stories, these lived experience stories, and also give the business case. And one thing that I noticed when I'd gone out to loads of masterclasses, and I noticed there was no empathy built in. There was no simulation built in, you know. And I thought that this was problematic in the sense that if your social mobility initiatives are driven by targets, and that's going to have an effect on your organizational culture, simply because when people like me come in to the organization, everyone else will look at me and think, you're here to meet a target. And so to build the empathy in, we have our masterclasses, which covers intersectionality, unconscious bias, all this stuff, but it's got lived experience stories dappled throughout. And we play games, and the games are designed to make you feel what it might be like to have cognitive overload from ADHD, or feel what it might be like to be dyslexic. And so building in empathy again. And once people leave this experience, they leave with an equilibrium of thought. So yes, it's absolutely right to meet targets, because we tell people exactly how to turbocharge their social value. But they also know they're doing it for the right reason. And you create that equilibrium of thought. And we highlight the qualities that system impacted people bring to the table. And there's evidence to back those up. And grit being the #1 predictor of success. Well, it's grit what these candidates come with through their life experience.
And that, you know, would you say that's in terms of the benefits for employers of seeking these candidates from who've had these different lived experience? Do you think grit's like that's the thing right up there? What are the other benefits, do you think, of finding these people?
It's not just grit, and don't take it from me. CIPD, BI Business in the Community, they've all done some research around this, you know. And you know, the good thing about this group is that they work harder, and they stay longer, and they're also good for your reputation. You know, people are really loyal, you know. So yes, you have grit, you have that resilience that people bring to the table, and I'll tell you why that's important in the workplace now. But the others that come with that is emotional intelligence and the ability to improvise, all predictors of success. Particularly in tough situations, you know. And so why is resilience great to have people with resilience in the workplace? Because, you know, I looked back and saw some research from Mind charity, I think it was, that done it. And, you know, and it said that 50% of the UK workforce is going to have mental health issues by 2030.
Yeah.
And we know the reasons why. There's been a concatenation of events, wars, the George Floyds, the Brexits, the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's just what's predicted. And, I am in the opinion that actually, I remember going through lockdown and going through these experiences, and the people that I knew that had suffered in life, faced barriers and all of that, handled that much better than the friends that I have that hadn't gone through a lot of those things. In fact, they were coming for advice. How do I get through this? It's going to be the same in the workplace. When things get really tough, and people's mental health is becoming more and more fragile, the ideal person to have sitting beside you is someone who's going to say to you, chill out, man, cool down. Actually, this isn't problems. I'll tell you what problems are. You need those resilient characters in the workplace now. And if you tackle the workplace with that, one thing about people that experience barriers and sufferation, if you like, they recognize it in other people when they're going through it. So when people are having experiences, we can kind of see those symptoms really early and say, hey, are you okay? Do you need any support? And things like that. And not only that, people who go through things like what I've gone through and people who experience barriers, they are inspirational people.
Yeah. So that adversity, it breeds resilience, it teaches emotional intelligence, and those are traits that employers should be seeking out in people.
Yes.
I wonder what you think of, I see a narrative being played out in the press at the moment that younger people have become too soft. The recruitment marketplace was too candidate focused, and the pendulum needs to swing back to employers, and people should get back in the office and do a proper job and toughen up. What's your thoughts on that sort of narrative that's out there at the moment?
Do you know, the system wasn't working before. It just simply was not working. The idea of saying, let's go back to that system, it's just, for me, I don't really want to say anyone's sort of ideas are ridiculous, but that one is just, for me, it's just a ridiculous idea. Evolution is really our value as the human family. We evolve, we get better and better at doing things. And of course, there's going to be people who have a fear of change. And that's what the problem actually is. Not that, this should be like that, people are soft. Actually, it's you scared of change. And I urge people to understand that change is a wonderful thing. And if we focus on this is I like the way things are and all the rest of it, you're just staying in a comfort zone, and you're keeping our country in a comfort zone. And if you're in a comfort zone, it kind of means you're not making progress. In order to make progress, you've got to get out of that comfort zone and move into this new space. And when it comes to national sort of things, we have to do this in coalition. And so that's why I'm really passionate about really getting people to get on board with this movement for social mobility, and join the coalition for change, to make our country a really great, balanced country where everyone feels included.
I completely agree with you. I guess we have to be aware not everybody does. And one of the things I've seen sort of recently is, again, sort of criticism from whether it's government or media around organizations, and particularly public sector organizations, spending money on diversity training and unconscious bias training, which seem like really good, sensible things to be doing to help organizations unlock candidates who aren't applying, and to make sure that their workforce does reflect the the community that they serve. That all seems sensible to me. On the other hand, we've seen the I forget the company who's done the research where where they apply for a job with a white sounding name on the CV, and then they change it for an Asian sounding name on the CV, and then they put an Asian picture on the CV, and you see the acceptance rates drop dramatically. And from what I've seen, sadly, the results of that experiment haven't massively improved over sort of 20 years. So what's your, you know, what you said earlier, look, we are making progress. There's still lots to do. Where does that sort of unconscious bias and diversity training fit in, do you think?
Well, do you know, the unconscious bias, there's two things actually. You know, we tend to, a lot of people human tend to do things how they've always done it, type of thing, you know, but there is unconscious biases that we all have. And the first thing I want to tell everyone, every single human, stop feeling guilty. Stop feeling guilty for having unconscious biases, because we all have them. I have them, you have them. They come from our learning histories. They come from our childhood experience. They come from TV media, you know. And so we have to get to a place where we are actually saying, okay, I know I have them, which means I just need to review myself on things. And I'll give you an example. You know, I was with a friend of mine, a Jamaican guy, and we were walking down the road, and we saw a bunch of African guys, you know, and I know it was Yoruba, because I could detect the sort of thing, and it was a load of them, and they were talking all at the same time, and it was loud, and he was like, how could they understand each other? Look how loud it is, and all this sort of stuff he was saying. And I said to him, it's interesting that you see that. I see something completely different. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, they can understand each other, because no one's saying, I don't understand what you're saying. They're all happy and laughing. So clearly they're enjoying the experience. I said, you saw the exact same thing in the trading pit and stock markets, what would you say then? I said, it's the same thing. They're all talking at the same time. It's very loud. They're throwing up all sorts of hand signs, and they're communicating. And we tend to look at that group and say, oh, look at those go-getters. They're the guys with the Lamborghini, for instance. When in fact, you just missed an opportunity because of that unconscious bias from seeing a group of people with the organic skills to work in those trading pits. Your mind could be saying, oh my God, these people don't even need training. Let's get them in. And our unconscious biases, it stands in the way of us recruiting really great talent, some of which have the organic skills for some of the positions out there in our workforces. You know, so it is about reducing that, knowing that our cultural norms are our cultural norms, but it doesn't mean if we're faced with something that's not aligned with those, it doesn't mean it's abnormal. Because I do know that if you burp around my dinner table, I'm going to think it's rude. I'm going to say that's rude. But there are dinner tables that if you do not burp, it suggests you're not in appreciation of the meal. A different culture. It goes against your cultural norm. It doesn't mean it's abnormal. It simply means it's different. And that's what we have to teach ourselves, understanding if it doesn't align with us, it just is something different. And therefore, we must investigate and explore.
I love that story there about the burping. It's, as you say, there's such a rich difference in history and culture and perspective that leads to these different understandings of what is normal, and therefore what biases you have. So how can an organization, you know, bearing that in mind, and what you were saying earlier about resilience and grit, emotional intelligence, how do organizations go about assessing and, you know, actively assessing candidates for those skills, rather than just say, give me a CV and I'll sort of read it and see if it's any good?
So for me, the CV is a load of what's it not, to be quite honest with you. You know, I'll tell you what the CV is. The CV is us. We're going into that jewelry shop, you know, and we're buying that ready cut diamond, all sparkly and nice. Jeweler's got a lovely smile on their face, but some of these diamonds are zirconias and cubic stones because mum wrote the CV, or ChatGPT wrote that CV. What we're talking about here is looking for those diamonds in the rough, you know, that only need a little polish and they'll sparkle like any other diamond. They're just a little bit more difficult to find because there's so many barriers up that they can't be got. But we know that it's pressure that has made the diamond as special as we know it. Millions of years of pressure, in fact. But we know it's pressure that has made our system impacted candidates so resilient and so filled with grit. And so it's about actually shifting that mindset and knowing that the CV is just a piece of paper that anyone can write, forge, do anything with. And so measuring for grit is really important. And I would urge and advise anyone to go on to Angela Duckworth's TED Talk about grit and have a look at her grit scale that she has put in place. And you can answer some questions and it will show what level of grit you have. And we're in the process of designing a new CV, which is called True Me, from British Folk Careers. And that has the grit score and various other personality traits that comes through, and it really gives system impacted candidates an opportunity to really shine, and for them to demonstrate through psychometrics and things like that their real potential.
You mentioned there system impacted candidates, and I assume what you mean from that is people who've experienced the care system, perhaps ex-offenders that have been in mental health institutes. And perhaps those people are exactly the candidates we want in terms of displaying grit, resilience, emotional intelligence. How do organizations make sure they're actually ready to attract and welcome those candidates in terms of, perhaps different support they might need?
So the thing that is about learning what these skills and qualities these candidates have, and so if I give an example of superhero movies, there's a reason why they're able to take down the baddie. It's simply because they aggregate all their different superpowers to become a force to be reckoned with. And so it's about trying to understand what these superpowers are. Currently, what we're doing, we're running a superhero movie where everyone's got the same superpower. And that's really quite boring and it lacks innovation. And so it's about understanding that, for instance, I'm dyslexic. So creative mind, creative thinking, maybe push me toward the marketing team. If I'm autism, ADHD, that ability to pinpoint focus, for instance, software development will be good for me. Care leavers, for instance, they've had to improvise their whole way through life. So anything to do with sort of research and development and ideas and this type of thing, how to solve problems and all that. These are all qualities that these different people bring to the table. So I'd urge everyone to actually not see this as a one size fits all, but to understand the intersectionalities of the candidates and what they really can bring to the table from their own personal lived experiences. And the reason why I use the word system impacted is because these are candidates who are impacted by the system. When you use terms like marginalized and all this time, it makes it sound like it's someone else's fault when it's not. It's just a system that has kept them out, and so they're impacted by that. And so it's time that we just simply do the right thing, do the right thing. And I encourage people to discover the qualities that people bring to the table and not try to bring people to the table because they look like you, sound like you, and all the rest of it, because it's no good. You really do, even in life, all your great ideas, your opportunities, all that stuff comes from your network. And so it's important to just simply meet people as if you were blind. You want to meet their mind. Forget about what they look like, what their name is, all that stuff. Just meet their mind. And if you get yourself in that mindset where you're meeting the mind, you can't really discriminate. The mind's not of a color, it's not of an accent or any of that stuff. You meet that mindset, and getting that mindset is really important to give these people the right opportunity, not just for them, but for you to see for yourself that actually these people are bringing some great new ideas, fresh ways of doing things. And my God, when a group of people fell to their knees at a problem last month, these people are actually relishing the opportunity to take on a problem, and it's inspiring the people from last month to actually get back in the game with this. So it really is about actually looking at that and just having that superhero force like the Avengers, where everyone knows what superpower they have, they know how to bring it together to become a force to be reckoned with, and that's going to put you in good stead for competition in all different angles of business.
Fantastic. I love that idea of assemble the Avengers, address the problems. So we've recently conducted a new set of research on our Stop the Bias program. And what we've done is we've been asking candidates, several thousand candidates, about what concerns them in terms of the recruitment process. We've asked recruiters what they're working on. And what we've also done is analysed more than 2 million job applications that went through the TribePad system during 2023 to find out what the actual outcomes were. So I want to share a few bits of a few points of data from that and get your thoughts on it. So the first one was around trust. So a lot of organizations will ask those ED&I questionnaires, questions at the front, what's your ethnicity, what's your gender, what's your age, etc. That, the questions vary, but the intent is usually to try and make sure that they're recruiting in a fair way. But candidates don't trust it. So our survey shows that only 33% of candidates actually trust the organization when they're asking those questions. Now, the good news is that's increased from 24% when we asked the question a couple of years ago, but it's still only a third of people. So, and generally younger people are more trusting. So I wonder what's your thought on, I guess the reasons why they might not trust are fairly obvious, but what do you think organizations can do about that to help candidates trust more that they're asking those questions for good reasons?
I think one of the things to do is for organizations to deliver this in a different way, so actually, if an organization was to say, for instance, we have just realized the power of neurodiversity, and we understand that dyslexic people are great at this, people with autism are great at this, and if this is the case, there might be promotions, there might be other opportunities that we can put in front of you that really will align with your way of thinking. Please come forward if you are X, Y, or Z. And people be more like, okay, so my neurodivergent is going to offer me more opportunity, which is the case. What they remember was that their neurodivergence or their race or whatever it is was a barrier. And so people are like, oh my God, if I write this down, then I'm going to face these barriers, or something's going to come up in front of me that I can't get through. So it's about how you communicate the need for this data, not only because, we want to just know, we just want to know how many people are dyslexic, or we just want to know how many. That's not good enough. What you would say is we not only want to know that we're doing the right thing to keep a balance on our diversity, but we also understand that different groups bring different things to the table, and we just want to build a workforce of different people who can be one whole thing that is innovative, caring, filled with empathy, reflects our local communities, reflects our customers, and all the rest of it. And it is about actually talking about it in this way, because the trust thing, the other thing that's important is to demonstrate that you've changed your candidate pathway, but let the people know. Don't just come out and say, oh, by the way, could you tell us if you're dyslexic or neurodivergent? Say, we've changed the candidate pathway to make sure more people who are neurodivergent can get in. And so if any of you are neurodivergent, please come forward, because we're going to need mentors. So then you've applied a purpose. Yeah. And so people then start to trust the system, because they'll say, they're doing this because they want to help other people like me. They're doing this because of X, Y, and Z, as opposed to, we just want your data, because that's
nobody wants to give up their data for no reason.
Right.
When we asked candidates, what they're most concerned about, perhaps unsurprisingly, age was the number one thing that came up. People thinking, I'm worried I'm too old and therefore they won't select me. But you touched on the point there about intersectionality. So somebody who is Black and female and also fits in that perhaps 45 to 65 category, to when these things stack up together. What's your sort of view of that in terms of, are candidates right to be worried about that?
Unfortunately, age gets a really bad deal. Applicant tracking systems are not even selecting certain people of a certain age. So they're not even getting into interview. They're not even getting an opportunity at all. And it's incredible because, many people have come out of the workplace to take care of an elderly mum, for instance, who might have dementia or whatever, and done a bit of caring and thought, right, let me get back, because they've got enough money, let me get back in the workplace now. And they're like, my God, I can't get back in. And it's incredible that you be locking people out with not just years of work experience, great qualifications, but they have life skills. They have that wisdom that they can bring to the table, as well, you know. And so it is, for me, really unfortunate that I'm having people contact me and saying to me, look, I think it's a good idea for me to take the dates of my schooling out, etc., because I don't want them to know my age. Employers need to now actively let people of a certain age, because we're living longer as well, say, look, you know, we really want you guys to come into the workplace because we know you can bring this to the table. And again, we are actively reducing those barriers, you know, to allow this. And it's about actually trying to send those messages out, you know. And if you had a job ad, and it's just talking about, you know, the different positions and all this sort of stuff, job ads need to change to be attractive and to build trust back into various groups, you know. So the job ad needs to talk about these things and say, look, we're actively working to reduce barriers for people of age. You know, again, we would like people of this group to apply and come in, and because XYZ reason, not just because you bring good skills and quality to the table, but you can mention words like, because we think that people of that age make great mentors, they bring great wisdom, and blah blah blah, and make people feel positive about coming in. But I will campaign for age, and there are intersectionalities that people have to really take into consideration. Like you said, you know, you could be, you know, black, female, neurodivergent, gay, all these things in one person, you know. And it really is about thinking about, imagine you're already facing all these different barriers. The more intersectionality points you hit, it feels like the more barriers you face. We need to really talk about intersectionalities more. We need to say, we want you to bring your whole intersectional self into work, because all those different qualities and skills, they mean something to us, and they mean something to the people working in different people working in the workplace, you know, because one candidate with those intersectionalities could relate to employees, colleagues. They can relate to people with neurodiversity, so they can cover so many different angles in terms of empathy and understanding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, what's interesting about, I think, the idea of age being the thing that most people are concerned about, is when we asked recruiters what they're working on and what initiatives they have in terms of DEI in the recruitment process, they were much more likely to be focused on gender and ethnicity, and age was often you know, not on their radar at all. Talking of ethnicity, one of the things we did, I mentioned, we analyzed 2 million job applications, and then looked at various different factors. And one of the things that jumped out to us was 9.4% of applications. So let's call it 9% of applications were coming from candidates who identified as Black. But when we looked at offers, it was 6.9% of people identifying as Black were getting the job offer. So, you know, when you first look at that data, you sort of go, okay, well, what, 9% of people are applying, but about 7% of people are getting the job. That sounds like there's discrimination, or there's something happening in the recruitment system that we should be concerned about. What we then did was look at the population, and we saw that around 4% of the population, according to the last census, identifies as Black. And therefore, you sort of flip that data on its head and go, well, hang on a minute, we've got 4% of the population making up 9% of applications, turning into 7% of hires. So actually 4% is turning into 7%. So we're over hiring candidates potentially. So you know, we looked at that data and thought, wow, there's lots of different possibilities going on here, and potentially some quite controversial conclusions to be drawn depending on what your perspective is. So you know, what's your immediate reaction to hearing that sort of 4% population, 9% applications, 7% job offers?
Well, first of all, we have to think about where did this data come from, and what level does it come from? You know, and if we're talking about, you know, blue collar or no collar sort of workers,
Yeah.
You know, it's going to look good or bad in one way or other, you know,
Yeah.
depends on, like you said, whichever way you look at it. But what we really need to look at is, what are these stats a little bit further up the ladder? What
Yeah.
are these stats like in management? What are these stats like in C-suite? Because I know they're poor.
Yeah.
I know they're poor. And so it's easy to come up with these numbers when you're looking at these entry-level jobs, that because a lot of people are only giving out these entry-level jobs to people with prior convictions, or people from BAME communities, or people, you know. And so we especially BAME communities, we really do need to not think about the stats on that level so much,
Yeah.
but think about the leadership roles. What are the stats looking like in those leadership roles? Because it's with that leadership part that the change will cascade down. And if you don't have any diversity up there, a lot of the time you're going to find that it is just a tick box exercise, or just meeting a target there. And you can see these stats being promoted as, look what we're doing.
Yeah.
No one's telling you it's just the people working on the door or doing the cleaning work or any of this sort of stuff, you know. And so it's super important for people to actually go out and do this. And I think that every organization has a personality, and people think that people can't see that personality, you know. And I always ask people sometimes, you know, I said, if your organization was a person, what type of person would that be? What type of personality do they have? Would you take them home to meet your family and friends? Do you think you'd be comfortable bringing that person among your diverse mates? I don't know. If the question can't be answered immediately, there's certainly work to be done, because candidates can see that personality. And whilst they might look on the website and see people that look like them and all this stuff, a lot of people are going a little bit further and looking at the board. They're looking at who else is there and what does that look like, because that is what will tell them how far they can go in an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, you know, you see representative imagery on the website, but then then in the application process, it asks you a set of questions that perhaps inadvertently are biased against you, or the way the technology is used. Perhaps you then make it to the interview and find, you know, there's nobody who looks like you on the interview panel, and all of these different factors. So, you know, what it's sort of your closing thoughts really about what can employers do? You know, can technology help? Can technology hinder? What do you think the best practice is in terms of being the best employer, in terms of, you know, really enabling that social mobility into your organization?
Well, for me, it's almost like the engine isn't running properly. And so if the engine isn't running properly, you're not getting the right fuel coming in.
Yeah.
You know, so the first thing we have to do is actually look at your hiring, your pathway, your candidate pathway into employment, and look at inclusion. Because if you get inclusion right, diversity comes automatically. So, you know, it's about focusing on that. And one of the things that we offer an advisory service, and it is just simply a pragmatic one, where we look at that pathway and we're able to come back with some solutions. And a lot of the time, from what I'm seeing, you might have 10 solutions, 8 of which can be done today and cost no money. You know, we had one travel company, I won't mention their name, but they were saying, we're not attracting people from disadvantaged backgrounds. They're just not clicking on our jobs. So we had a look. There's a whole bunch of different things that they could change, but the one that really stood out was that it was a high-end travel company, and they had their external facing sort of brand, the same brand for candidates. And so it was champagne on the beach and, you know, Bollinger and all this type of thing. I'm like, people from disadvantaged backgrounds that take one look at that and think, okay, that's not my crowd. You know, I haven't, you know. And so they changed that, and then there was more uptake. Just like a simple thing to change, because now it's more inclusive of those groups. You know, you can't put a bottle of champagne and glasses of, you know, and yachts in the background.
There's low-hanging fruit. There's quick wins that the organizations can take that make a real difference. My last question to you, I mean, and I've asked a few people this question, but I guess particularly for your start in life, it's even more relevant. what would you go back and say to your 20-year-old self with with everything you've learned to this far?
With everything I've learned this far, I'd love to go back and tell my 20-year-old self that buckle up. It's going to be a serious ride, if I'm honest. And I'd like to. So when I was younger, because of the barriers my parents faced, and the people around me, they were telling me just to get a job on the bus or get a job on the train and this type of thing. And I know a lot of people took that advice, and it was based upon, don't bother to try and go any higher because they will not let you in. They didn't let us in. They will not let you in. And I think there was times where I spent time considering that, so much so that I didn't bother.
Yeah.
And I would like to go back to my 20-year-old self and basically say, if anyone tells you to get a job on a bus when you know you could be a scientist, you continue to try to be that scientist until they let you in. And I'd like to tell myself those words that I read in a book by Napoleon Hill, and it really is simply, failure cannot cope with persistence.
What a great place to leave it. Chance, thank you so much for sharing your story, your perspectives, your advice and your insights. Some fascinating stuff, I think, for employers there. Thank you so much. If you want to find the research that we were talking about, visit tribepad.com/stop the bias. And if you want to subscribe to more episodes, more fascinating conversations, you can subscribe to The View at tribepad.com/The View, and we'll notify you when there's future episodes. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.